Hey everyone, welcome to this week's activities. I've got two required readings for you. Don't worry, they're both pretty short relative to the longer ones we've already done. The first reading, upon perusal, is a paper by Shi, Lee, and Bigdelli, Journal of Business Research 2016. The title is An Examination of NPD Models in the Context of Business Models. It's a paper on new product development, new product diffusion, or the adoption of new products. It's a significant area of research on our topic for this week, which is product concepts. The BAS model is a core theory of innovation adoption that actually can be applied to a lot of different types of innovations or really even new ideas and the extent to which and the method by which people adopt new ideas, whatever those ideas may be. But it's also applied to product adoption. This is a modeling paper with empirical validation. They have a data set. Actually have several data sets. They use part of the data set to calibrate their model, and then they use the other part to forecast and predict to see if their model will predict this part of the data set. So it's really interesting in that sense. The question that you should be asking yourself for any modeling paper is, does this new model perform better than previous or alternative models? And that's kind of what they unpack in this paper. This particular paper considers the product's interplay with price in terms of the revenue model, which is really interesting. My tips for reading this paper, because it can be tricky, is to read the introduction and the literature review to get some context, and then to kind of think of the math explanations as a way to help you understand the factors that they're including in the model. And then the figures, and especially that general discussion, is going to be very useful for you to understand what you should be taking away from this paper and how it's contributing over and above previous research. That's paper number one. Paper number two is a full paper up on perusal. It's by Jung, 2006. It's actually a highly cited conference paper from the Association of Consumer Research. The title is Cross-Gender Brand Extensions, Effects of Gender of Brand, Gender of Consumer, and Product Type on Evaluation of Cross-Gender Extensions. Product line extensions is another really significant area of research in this topic of product. This is, again, a very highly cited paper, especially for a conference. Um, excuse me. Part of one of the core theories that this is building on or expanding is this idea of fit for a brand extension, the fit that this extension has with the current portfolio or with the parent brand. So it's a core theory to be aware of. Note the asymmetric effects that they uncover, especially when you're looking at figure one. You can see that based on the gender of the consumer, there are different responses. These effects are culturally driven, particularly by the patriarchal gender norms of the participants that are being studied here in this paper. So it's interesting to connect that to our talk about intersectionality and the role that norms and power play in any given study. The sample size is also something interesting to note. This paper is from 2006, but each condition has about 30 participants. And that is one of the original rules of thumb that we have for how many participants we should be having in our studies. The original rule of thumb is about 30 per group. The modern rule of thumb is ideally a little more. So 40 or 50 is a good compromise number. Some folks say you should have up to 100. If you talk to a sociology person, they would say you need over 1,000. So I like to say a minimum of 30 is a good target goal. I like to personally aim for 40 or 50. That way, if I need to filter out some of the respondents in case they weren't paying attention or they did it wrong or whatever the case may be, I still got a sufficient sample size that's going to make my statistical models behave properly with some reliable and valid data. So it's interesting to note that in this paper. My discussion prompts, our discussion prompts for both of these papers is our standard group reading discussion prompts. Highlight, comment, and discuss areas that are unclear where you have questions, critiques, or follow-up ideas. And then again, select additional prompts from the syllabus, which I've highlighted here. Again, highlighting where the research question is identified, our questions plural, the contributions, the methods, and the relevance to practitioners and researchers. Those are the required readings. Here are some supplemental readings as well. Ulrich and I'm going to say Tissier Desbordes, I think it's French, 2018, in a less prominent journal called Qualitative Marketing Research. My suggestion is to read the abstract and skim the rest as desired. For me, what I like to do is I'm going to read the abstract, and then the pieces of the abstract I don't quite understand, I'm going to go find that in the paper to make sure that I read enough of that to understand what the abstract is saying. This is a qualitative paper, so I wanted to give you multi-method approaches here so you can see how they look at the similar topic of cross-gender brand extensions from a qualitative lens. My advice here, especially when it comes to qualitative papers, is the results section is your best friend. They're going to do a lot of unpacking and explaining of what's going on in the abstract through themes that they identified and also a really nice use of representative quotes that they pulled from the interviews that they conducted. The second paper is Schulman and Gu. It's in Marketing Science 2024, a very recent paper. It's on inclusive product design. It's a purely analytical modeling paper. Analytical, meaning there's no empirical data set. And what is happening in analytical papers is they're essentially making assumptions about how the market or how stakeholders or different actors in the market are behaving, and then they're using math to describe how these relationships are going to map onto each other and therefore be predictive of different outcomes. Here, what they're modeling is the interaction effect. So it's a 2x2 of biases that individual researchers, market researchers have in a company, biases for or against inclusive product design. That's one factor. The other factor is the company culture, whether they are one that's more focused on rewards or punishment. And they use that 2x2 with some additional assumptions to predict when the different factors are going to lead to more or less investment in inclusive product design. So it's a really interesting approach. I also like it because it gives you an example of how you can use purely math, analytical modeling without even any data sets to not only model the actions of firms, but also model individual behavior, including biases and culture. So I like it for that reason. My suggestion here, the abstract is pretty good, but actually the introduction does almost all of the explaining that you need in relatively plain English compared to like super quantitative math speak. The intro is going to do a lot of heavy lifting. So if you read the intro, I think actually you get a really good understanding of why the counterintuitive effects are arising in the paper. And also, it gives you a sense of how, even for a paper without any data, they're able to set up counterintuitive findings through the way that they're thinking through the setup of the two variables that are interacting. So I do recommend, if you got the time, check out those supplemental readings, skim the rest of the paper as desired. But beware, it's a lot of math speak. So if you love math speak, this is for you. But if not, then don't feel stressed by it. As always, if you get stuck or have questions or want to bounce ideas off me, feel free to text me. You've got my number. I think that's it for this time around. I'll see you in the next one.